There's a light in my life that shines so bright, a light that Jesus turned on. It glows through my heart and it lifts up my soul to a place of a heavenly quiet. This light is love, a love so divine, a love so freely given, a love so great that he gave his life so that we could all be saved. So let's go follow Jesus and don't dim that light, the light of love divine, the light of the word always be with you, to have and to share with all. So let's go follow Jesus and don't dim that light, the light of love divine, a love so great that he gave his life so that we could all be saved, so that we could all be saved.
Antonio Rosmini was a man of the 19th century, a priest, a religious, and the founder of the two religious orders, the Institute of Charity and the Sisters of Providence. A patriot, philosopher, ascetic, educationalist, spiritual director, and a political negotiator who worked tirelessly for the spiritual and political renewal of his time. He was a profound thinker, author of more than 100 works, both philosophical and theological. He was the embodiment of charity on all levels, temporal, intellectual, and spiritual. Rosmini today teaches us how to unite the earthly with the heavenly, the temporal with eternal. He placed himself as a bridge between faith and reason, a man of dialogue, a friendly person who encouraged one to accept the whole truth. His father, Pier Modesto, a gentleman of the old school, and his mother, Giovanna, was gentle, ran the great household very efficiently. Josepha Margherita, the eldest of the 4 children, was a remarkable woman, very intelligent and well-read, with high religious ideals, and she joined at the age of 30 the new congregation of the Daughters of Charity, founded by the Blessed Maddalena di Canossa. Margherita, Antonio, and Giuseppe were brought up in the manner of the times. The younger son Felice died in infancy. Antonio was born in a noble and aristocratic family on March 24th, 1797, and was baptized on the following morning, on the feast day of Annunciation, a date that he kept throughout his life as his happiest anniversary. The greatest event of his life was to be called to the Church of Christ, raised by baptism to the supernatural life. Baptism had further effect on Rosmini's life, he wrote. By bringing me into the world on the vigil of the feast of the Annunciation of the Virgin Mary, God showed that he wanted to give her to me as my mother and protector. As indeed I have always found her, though I have been an ungrateful son. Rosmini was very faithful in his devotion to Mother Mary, and he dedicated the little institute he founded to the care and protection of Our Lady of Sorrows. Rosmini lived through an extremely turbulent period of European history. Rosmini's Italy was very different from today's Italy. The events during the early years of Rosmini's life were a crucial part of the big political issues of his time, that is, the unification of Italy. Rosmini was particularly influenced by events in three other states of Italy, that is, Trent, Lombardy, and the Kingdom of Piedmont, Sardinia. Born at Rovereto, part of Trent, Rosmini was thereby an Austrian subject. He showed immense love for learning, has read the Bible and the lives of the saints. He knew the scriptures well before he was adolescent, and he has spent hours in the family library, reading ancient and modern classics, with a keen eye for the great works of philosophy and theology, and acquired an immense erudition. It was his closest friend Manzoni, the greatest Italian writer at the time, who said, "There seems to be no book that Rosmini has not read." In 1813, when he was 16, he wrote in his diary, "This year was for me a year of grace. God opened my eyes over many things, and I knew that there was no true wisdom but in God." It was in 1814 he informed his parents of his decision to become a priest, shattering the dreams of his aristocratic parents, who had made other plans for him. Rosmini was ordained priest in 1821. He wrote in his diary, "From this hour I must be a new man. Live in heaven with a heart and mind. Converse always with Christ. Despise and flee from the things of the earth. I must return from the altar a saint, an apostle, a man of God." St. John Bosco said of him, "I have never seen a priest say Mass with more devotion than Father Rosmini." During the first years of his ordination, Rosmini was full of youthful enthusiasm to use his gifts for the general benefit of the society. He founded a society of friends, which was to be a sort of Platonic academy, but with no specific bent. He had the idea of forming a group of like-minded men who would work together towards compiling of a Christian encyclopedia, so as to combat the famous French encyclopedia, which during the 18th century had undermined much of the traditional Christian teaching. The project came to nothing. Rosmini drew a lesson from this failure and spelled it out in his principle of passivity, consisting of two complementary resolutions, which can be summarized thus. It is possible to criticize Rosmini's principle as being too passive. Rosmini was always faithful to this basic rule, and out of it drew the maxims of Christian perfection. Rosmini was always faithful to this basic rule, and out of it drew the maxims of Christian perfection. The constitution of his order, and all his later ascetical works. The whole of Rosmini's meditation on the gospel is presented in the 6 maxims, and they are addressed not only to his spiritual sons and daughters, but to all Christians who want to embrace perfect Christian life. The maxims of Christian perfection is the foundation of the whole Rosminian spirituality. It was Saint Maddalena di Canossa who indicated to Rosmini his vocation as a founder of the new religious order. She had herself founded a congregation of religious sisters, and Rosmini's only sister joined them. He came to know the founders well, and she tried to persuade Rosmini to found a male branch of her own order. Rosmini followed all providential signs, and early 1828 he retired with a few friends to a disused monastery near Domodossola in the foothills of Alps, and spent his Lent in prayer and reflection. On the 20th February 1828, he started writing the constitutions of his new religious order, which he called the Institute of Charity, Rosminians. The institute is made up of Christians who, moved by the desire to follow Christ, our Lord and Master, aim at their own sanctification, supporting one another by word and example. Our own sanctification includes the exercise of charity towards our neighbor. The Institute by its nature embraces in its aim and spirit every form of charitable activities which lead to universal love of Christ. The following year he went to Rome to seek confirmation from the Pope Pius VIII. I still remember, wrote Rosmini, his loving and authoritative words. And with regard to the Institute of Charity, the Pope reassured him, start in a simple way and let the Lord do the work. It is necessary to start with humility and prudence. You are on the right track. Continue what you are doing. Jean-Baptiste Lauwenburg, a zealous French priest who said that he would collaborate the founding of the new institute, arrived at Mount Calvary at Domodossola on 8 July 1828. Rosmini was waiting for him since 20th February. He had already drawn up the constitutions for the Society of Charity. Thus the new religious community began. In May, a friend of Rosmini, Giovanni Boselli, a Milanese priest and a holy, talented man, had asked if he could join Rosmini in his solitude. Candidates started to arrive, and the house of Calvario became the mother house of the Institute. In 1831, Rosmini, invited by the local bishop, made a second foundation at Trent. They followed in 1835 and in 1836 the foundations at Stresa, Sacra di San Michele, Tame in Savoy. Then Luigi Gentili, a trusted companion of Rosmini, took off from Italy to England and Ireland and established new Rosminian missions. Later on, the English brethren left for New Zealand to start the missions there, and similarly the Irish brethren to the United States and Africa, the Italian brethren to Venezuela and India. The early missions of the Institute were basically schools, colleges, and pastoral ministry, and thus the Rosminians started to flourish in their missions. Shortly after the foundation of the Institute of Charity, the Sisters of Providence were founded as the female part of those living the Rosminian consecrated life. Rosmini took over the direction of the sisters towards the end of 1833. He gave them a rule similar to that of the male branch and watched over the spiritual growth of each one of them, guiding them in their choice of works of charity. The two congregations are each completely independent but have the same end and follow the same style of life. In 1837, Rosmini established a central house for the sisters at Domodossola and appointed their first Mother General in the person of Sister Giovanna Camilla Antonietti. Today their field of apostolate besides Italy, England and Ireland has been extended to Tanzania, Venezuela, Colombia and India. Today many are attracted to the great saga of Rosmini, and a good number of lay faithful and clerics live and practice Rosminian spirituality, and they take a special vow of obedience in the institute and become ascribed members and adopted sons and daughters who are close collaborators in the missions. Rosmini was a great lover of the church, and he dedicated all his talents to increase holiness and charity in the Immaculate Bride of Jesus. Obedient to the call of Pope Pius VIII and Gregory XVI to serve the church by writing books in order to take people by means of reason, and by these means to lead them to religion. He wrote over 100 large volumes of philosophy and theology that constitute a formidable system of Christian philosophy and theology of his time and of time to come. His purpose was to form a strong philosophical system in order to support the theology of his time and not to contradict any of the thinkers or philosophical systems of his time. However, Rosmini became a target of a small but a very influential section within the church that opposed the teaching of Rosmini by all means. His writings and teachings were attacked severely by his opponents. They published anonymous letters and books to criticize his teaching and used most offensive names and language to spoil his reputation. Within a short period of time, however, things began to change dramatically. There was an insurrection in Rome which caused the hurried escape of the Pope Pius IX to Gaeta in Naples. Rosmini was asked by the Pope to follow him in exile, finding his advice and presence reassuring. Rosmini's opponents, however, took advantage of the confused situation to launch fierce attack on Rosmini, concentrating on his book, The Five Wounds of the Church, which was eventually condemned and placed in the index of the forbidden books. This book presented the immediate need for reforming the church and the clergy, but Rosmini was not given the reason for the condemnation. Rosmini submitted humbly and fully, leaving no one in doubt about his immense love for the church and for the Holy See, which he called the essential rock on which Christ built his church. Rosmini's adversaries further constrained Pope Pius IX to have all his works published to be examined with the hope of obtaining a condemnation of them all. It was a serious examination, lasting several months, in which the contents of his works were scrutinized, and it was personally followed by the Pope. This resulted in his works being declared free from any ecclesiastical censure in 1854. The conclusion of Pope Pius IX disappointed those who had expected a condemnation of all his work. After the death of Pope, Rosmini's adversaries got his works examined a second time. The outcome satisfied them because it carried a condemnation of 40 propositions taken from many of his works, with the explanation that they did not appear to be in harmony with the Catholic Church. During the Second Vatican Council, many of the teachings of Rosmini were taken for the renewal of the Holy Church. All the successors of Pope Pius XII spoke of him with esteem and appreciation, and the time came for the Pontifical Commission to re-examine his works after 3 commissions, each lasting about 2 years. The result of the examination was the Nota of the Congregation in July 2001. Pope John Paul II declared all teachings of Rosmini free of error. This is what Rosmini wrote to a friend during those agonizing days. Thank you for sharing the strange and almost incredible events through which I am led by Providence, whose unchanging design never change. Meditating on Providence, I wonder at it. Wondering at it, I love it. Loving it, I celebrate it. Celebrating it, I thank it. and thanking it, I am filled with joy. Could it be otherwise? I know, through reason and through faith, and feel the depths of my spirit, that everything done or wished or permitted by God is done by eternal, infinite, essential love. And who could be sad before love? This is a very profound and complete submission of one's life to the will of God. Persons who find their total joy in the love of God can only be so complete in their total abandonment. For most of his life, Rosmini had been weak in health, and the stress of years when his orthodoxy was under suspicion undermined his frail constitution. From the beginning of May 1855, his condition deteriorated considerably and he was confined to bed. As the news of his grave illness spread, there was continuous flux of friends who came to pay homage and to hear once more his wise words. He welcomed everyone with a smile and words of comfort, and raising their minds immediately to the goodness and love of God. He left to Manzoni his last words of spiritual counsel: adore, be silent, and rejoice. Rosmini's condition was very serious. Received the last sacrament, and he left for his eternal home in the early hours of 1st July 1855, the feast of precious blood, which was his favorite devotion. His body is buried in the chapel of the college at Stresa, on the shores of Lake Maggiore, the north of Italy. And over his tomb is inscribed the eulogy that Pope Gregory XVI addressed to the whole church in the apostolic letters approving the institute in 1839. Our beloved son, the priest Antonio Rosmini, founder of the institute, is a man of eminent intellect, adorned with noble qualities of soul, exceedingly famous for his knowledge of things human and divine, outstanding for his remarkable piety, religion, virtue, probity, prudence, and integrity, conspicuous for his wonderful love and loyalty to the Catholic religion and to his apostolic see. Today, we all desire to give thanks to the Lord for his great gift of Rosmini's life and of the two orders